Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious. What was the scariest thing that happened to you while at school or at work? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 19, I was in engineering school and I had a huge crush on this very shy guy, so of course I organized a party and invited him. Everyone knew I wanted to hook up with him. He rejected me and told me about this girl he was in love with. They started dating and after a few months they broke up. One day, out of the blue, he invites for a movie. On the way back home, he pulls a knife and stabs her 50 times. She did not die. I don't know how. I literally spent the night with him on the couch in my friend's basement. I'm glad he rejected me. She ended up needing like 12 surgeries just to reconstruct her face. Well, not as crazy as some of these other stories, but I had brought a bag of edibles to my high school and I was selling them individually, gummy worms. I was sitting at a table with my friends during lunch when someone walks up to me and looks panicked. They then proceed to point down the hallway that leads to the cafeteria before I could ask them why they looked so freaked out. I saw why. There were multiple cops and drug dogs coming to check us. I nearly shit myself. I got up calmly and walked to the locker room and proceeded to eat the edibles I had left and flushed the package in the toilet. Safe to say, I never brought edibles back to school again. I think I speak for all of us when I ask, how did that go for you? And was there no other way to get rid of those edibles? I was working with my spinal cord injured service user and he fell heavily out of his wheelchair. His wife totally lost her shit and it was up to me to try and fix things for him. They had only recently moved house and had very little in the way of furniture or belongings there, and I just couldn't find anything I could use to help him level back up to his chair. I felt totally helpless. I can usually find a way in situations like that. I managed to keep my cool at the time, but I had to stop to have a good cry shortly after setting off home. This one was in primary school and probably isn't as bad as any of the ones on here, but here you go. So I was sitting doing my classwork like a good little boy when suddenly I hear a loud sound, and I look over at some teachers are around what appeared to be broken glass. We were taken out of the class and went to a different classroom, and when I realized one of the kids wasn't there, I asked one of my friends where they were, and he wasn't the only one missing. He never came back to school. I left it, but only now, 6 years later, when I was having random thoughts did it occur to me what had happened. One kid threw another kid into a door, which was made almost fully of glass, and the glass broke into shards. A shard went into the kid's head and killed him. I'm not sure what happened to the other kid, and I don't think I will ever know. Back in high school, 2009-2010, two people threatened our school with a bomb. They went to school with us and said it was in a locker. The whole school was out on lockdown. Not evacuated, just locked down. It freaked a lot of us out, mostly because this is in the South. Most of us thought it was an active shooter. Nope, just two dudes calling in a bomb threat as a prank. I'm a fireman. I entered the house on fire as the nozzle man. Before we get to the fire, the windows broke out of 40-mile-an-hour winds that day turned the hallway we were into a blowtorch, right down to the floor. I opened the nozzle, but it did nothing. I could feel and hear my skin burning between my mask and my hood. I maintained position while my crew evacuated, and then I left the way I came in. When we got out of the smoke, we couldn't even tell because our masks had been charred over. 1. In the 8th grade, our school gave us a celebratory day off where we went to the nearest park. We walked, it was only 5 minutes, had a picnic, and just got to hang out. Everything was fine until this one student showed up on his bike with what looked like a gun and pulled it out on this other kid. The other kid beat him up and broke the gun, which turned out to be plastic. The gun kid reached for his pocket, but by this time the teachers finally saw what was happening and finally came over. The kid got on his bike and rode away. Turns out the gun kid was saying shit about the other kid's mom, and the other kid threatened to beat him up next time he saw him. The other kid texted the gun kid that we had a picnic, when and where it was at, and the gun kid pulled up. Turns out he had a real gun, and he was reaching for it until the teachers came. Number 2. One boy in my class, also 8th grade, was a tall, skinny, and pale kid. He had dark hair and extremely dark eyes. He looked creepy and weird, and always made jokes about shooting up the school. One day he got suspended, told me he was going to shoot my mom, his teacher, and my best friend's mom, also his teacher. Then continued about how he had a list of kids I want to see go first. My name wasn't on it, but I reported it anyway. They expelled him immediately, called the school cops and dragged me to the office and basically told me I didn't have proof and I made it up. They shot down everything I said and tried to make me doubt myself. He ended up coming to the high school with me for the freshman year. I saw him and he said no hard feelings. And that's the last thing he said to me. Last I heard, he was expelled for fighting. I was working at a school and there was an incident outside in which I guess someone in a car came close to hitting someone with a gun. The person with the gun opened fire, fired into the air or something. I was on the inside of the school. This is in the US, so immediately we go on lockdown because people just heard or saw the shooting and assumed it was a mass shooter. I didn't tell my family, but I texted my fiance that I might die and that I loved him. We were under lockdown for like half an hour. Thankfully, no one got hurt. But it's really scary to think there's a mass shooter. Makes for a great response to the interview question, how do you handle stress now? I also had someone pass out right in front of me at work. He just got dehydrated in the hot warehouse. I didn't realize people's eyes roll back like that, so I thought he was dying. I was so relieved when he woke up, yeah. I work in a chemical plant in my 20s. I saw a guy on a fork truck take a curve too fast and flip over. He was wearing his seatbelt and got ejected from the seat far enough for the forklift top to crush his head. I remember being frozen in my tracks like it was a bad dream, and then coming to my senses and helping my coworkers lift the truck off the guy. But it was obviously too late. Blood was flowing like a stream. The truck was still running, and I was the one who reached in and turned off the ignition. The company afterward destroyed that forklift, and I was really glad they did. In the US, we have school lockdown trainings for potential attackers, shootings, etc. On 2 occasions, those trainings were real. In elementary school, we had a lockdown for real because across the street from us, the neighboring elementary school, a dad who was fighting for custody of his son brought a gun and shot his son and himself in the middle of the track field. Second time, a neighboring school had a guy come onto the campus with a gun. Thankfully, it was a fake gun, and he was just a crackhead, not looking to kill anybody, but still, scary. Not surprisingly, there are a lot of stories of US schools being on lockdowns. I don't know if it's a compliment to the safety measures or an indictment on the system itself. About a year ago, we had a guy work on our line who was kind of an asshole. One day, he got caught using his phone while working and got pissed about it. This ended up with him yelling and cussing at our supervisors, flipping chairs, damaging our products, and had to be held back when tried to hit one of them. This was happening at our break area. That is an open area. So he was having a meltdown literally in front of everyone to see. It was unsettling, but it was also funny. Security was called and he was escorted out. The ironic part was that he got permission to start working first shift next week so he could be home with his kids, and that was his last day working on our shift. So I work in the IT solutions industry, and after my first few weeks of training, I met my first, from what I believed, schizophrenic client. I remembered not only how much, but how fast he kept looking around, kept scratching at his skin, kept looking at me blankly. Additionally, he believed his wife and kids were hacking into his, and I'm not joking, 5 iPhones. There were many times when he told me what he would do as a result of his kids hacking into his iPhone's security system. I remember him telling me how he would throw all of their toys into their pond and how he would get onto his wife and kids for doing so. During this, I continued to attempt to diagnose the hacking because, if anything, I thought I could hopefully ease him of this idea that they were not, in fact, getting into his device, but it never seemed to work, as any form of troubleshooting I would do, he would turn down. After an hour's worth of diagnosing and attempting to fix an issue I couldn't find, I noticed him whispering under his breath, and at this point, just staring at me like I was a piece of bait. Due to my company's policy, I can't report any issues without actual conflict, so without him hurting me, I couldn't reach out to anyone. I hope his wife and kids are mentally and physically stable, and I hope he eventually got medical help. I'm not too sure about anything that happened after, but definitely something I'll remember. We had a bomb threat one day in middle school. It was a normal day until we were suddenly asked to evacuate the school. No one knew what was happening, even the teachers. It wasn't until everyone had evacuated all the way to another school that we found out that it was a bomb threat. Everything ended up being okay though. There was no actual danger and everyone was fine. I work really late hours. Being someone on the shorter side doesn't do me any favors, and I don't know why people think it's an invitation to follow me home from work. If they really start scaring me, I turn around and wait for them to go first. The sun usually starts coming up by then. In high school, my first year, I had this really creepy English teacher who would always want me to stay after with him, like, "Oh, why don't you stay after if you don't understand the material?" Or, "Why don't you stay after and help me with this or that?" And dude, all the time, he would find a way to put his hands on me, like my shoulder or hold my arm or hand. One time, he put his hand on my thigh and it was like super yikes. The last straw came when he grabbed my side from the back and hugged me. I had to let him know I was not into that. He got fired when I was a junior for texting other girls, and I don't know all the specifics, but I think it's kind of obvious. Trust your gut. I used to always say it was all in my head and no one would believe me. F that. Had 2 bomb threat incidents, second of which referenced guns and Columbine stuff, happening within the span of 2 weeks during my practice at a school. Police arrived during the second time it happened and proceeded to patrol the area for 3 weeks afterwards. Teaching with the police patrolling on high alert and knowing that the doors can't be locked but at best can be barricaded with furniture was genuinely quite scary. Thankfully, the guy making the threat was apprehended and the guy didn't have guns nor bombs. 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck in 1990 while I was at our school's laboratory. Thought someone was just jiggling the lab table our group was using. When I realized it was an earthquake, I ran 4 floors down to the school quadrangle without a look back at my classmates. I was swaying as I ran down the stairs, fearful that it would collapse at any moment and bury me under several tons of concrete. When I finally got to the quadrangle, it was already filled with students. We were lucky that the epicenter wasn't near our city, but further up north, where the damage was more extensive and horrific, including 2 hotels collapsing, as well as a multi-story school building that killed 154 students and teachers. Were you ever a part of a natural disaster? How did you handle it? Last year, a fight occurred with a different school. The kid who was from the other school threatened to shoot up my school. Luckily, no one's life was taken, but people were scared. I didn't know what happened until the day in English the principal went into the speakers saying how nothing will happen. I remember the hallways being less crowded because of people being paranoid and staying home. Another recent one, 2 cousins wore a ski mask in front of the school where the buses were dropping kids off. I don't remember what happened, but I remember hearing, possibly was a rumor, there were several different versions, one of the cousins had a gun on him and were in a fight. I was at school, working in a group with 3 of my friends, let's call them Jake, Jack, and Sam. So, me and Jake and Jack are sitting working in the library in Google Docs and Sam was effing up the document, so we kicked him from it, and this effing kid pulls out a knife and threatened to kill us one by one in the middle of the effing library, and he said it loud. He quickly realized what he said loudly in public and put the knife away and acted like nothing happened.